Hello, everyone. This is Michael. Welcome to week 8. This is the week in which we're going to kind of complete all the work that you've done so far, finding a data set, marking it up into HTML, understanding its organization and how to organize it for someone else to use it, flow through a particular scenario that you worked on this week, and finally illustrating that in something that most people can understand, which are called wireframes. And so if you look at Project 4, I do want you to get a little bit familiar with this because right now, what will happen is we will stop our own explorations into our own data set and we'll start to use the knowledge that we got to go look at someone else's data set or some other person's or other uh, site that kind of went down the same road as you did. So, what I have chosen here as a starter and what I would like you to do is if you're in a particular realm of information, if you can find a service that kind of takes your idea and takes it further. Some of you might have already taken your data from a site like this, like IMDb. But so if you want to, please try to keep the thread alive, so to speak. There are a lot of competing services out there, so I don't think we have to worry too much about there being overlap. But one thing that's important in this list for me is that most of the value of this service is through user generated data. Now, I know we haven't really talked a lot about that kind of flow of the users entering data. We will starting next week. We'll call it metadata, and that has to do with things like rating and sharing and commenting, and that sort of world that we all are pretty used to is actually a fairly new world. So most companies have to go off of homegrown data or hire people to keep their data good and up to date. The metadata kind of is a whole new creation of the web where you can share in that goal of keeping things up to date and keeping it realistic. So all of these, I think, are great examples of that. And I'm also fine if you have a particular site that also is based on user-generated data that you want to explore. And the exploration is really how did they do it? You know, how did they start with probably a simple data structure? Can you figure out that structure? And I'm interested in how did it evolve like you're evolving? And one thing that I think is important, if I could kind of give you a hint, is that they changed over time. And these small changes are really kind of the goal of the next part of the information architect, which is to, after releasing it, to understand how to modify the user patterns or modify the flow to make things easier or better. So we can't really get into that too much, but I think you can understand that's uh, we've laid the groundwork, and then there's much more to do in terms of understanding what works and what doesn't work within the way we've laid things out. So this is available. I might have screwed up the dates. I'm going to double check on that. It seems like quite a long time, but we do have 11 weeks, and we're week 8, so there'll be 2 more lectures, week 9 and 10, and we'll cover some very lofty ideas and subjects. But during that time, to explore and to get familiar with knowledge, and of course, at the end of next week, we want to be able to submit our finished wireframes, which illustrate a flow through the site. And I'm not interested in the wireframes necessarily. I think a lot of you might have gone a bit overboard, to be quite honest, with a lot of stuff that really wasn't sort of crucial to this happy path that I kind of talked about a little bit up here. The happy path also might have been uh, a little bit understandable. IFTTT, let me just go into this really quick. The reason why I did IFTTT is not only that it's an interesting site, but it's also a value proposition that's very malleable. Like really, it's a really well information architected site because they don't control the sites; they just control the connection that you build between the sites. And so the probably simplest thing that you did on IFTTT was some sort of notification, like an event happened. And I think we already got some complaints that all of us are a little bit sick of just events happening because it while it's interesting, it's still just vying for your attention unless that event is very unusual or rare. But what is interesting is getting it to do work for you. And so I think they just did a nice job of showing how these particular this interface helps you understand a fairly decent computing subject, which is if this then that, which is kind of a way you teach computers how to do things. You say, wait for a condition and then do it. Um, so we did also learn kind of a nomenclature, a storytelling nomenclature about how you can talk about flows. Uh, I also introduced, this idea of these thumbnail flows, and I will say that, having some sort of an indicator overview map of what your wireframes are meant to do is helpful to me. You can use this particular kind of fidelity if you wish. I just kind of call them, this is kind of easy to say, well, there's not that many kinds of interface designs, and sometimes you're really just plugging in information to existing flow or flow patterns. If anyone's ever used a CMS system, you might realize you're just plugging in data and to a database, and that pattern displays it elsewhere. So we are really interested in that reuse, recycle, reusable stuff. So if you go to this week's lecture, you'll see me doing a fairly elaborate explanation of wireframing, of some techniques in wireframing. So this video here is something that I'm kind of showing how you wireframe in Sketch and how you actually wireframe with real data. What wireframes are meant to do is pretty much illustrated here. It's kind of the visuals behind your flow. So hopefully none of this comes as something brand new. You've kind of put all the layers together. The missing layer is probably the HTML structure, and that's what's really important to view in this video of how do you reuse that structure to show what how you visualize each record of your data. I'll probably end up doing a Blue Jeans session again this week for people with questions or who want to run something by me. The Murally for this week, and I hope everybody, please write me if you're finding it difficult to use Murally. I know I got a lot of email comments and responses, but actually I feel like that's appropriate. I think it's good to have that in the class other than Canvas, which can be a bit demure when it comes to discussion. So I'm going to stick with Murally. I do have a thought. Having looked at some of your flows here, I realize a lot of you are really tackling very similar things. So I know at least two of you are doing playlists for moods and music, and to me, I don't really mind if, for example, in this final deliverable, the wireframes, if you team up. I'm not the biggest fan of group exercises, just because. But I actually, if all of you wanted to band together, kind of merge your data sets and come up with a interface that you felt was appropriate and kind of bounce off of each other, that's fine. So if you want to do that, I'm just going to open up that as an option here in Murally to tell me kind of who's teaming with who and what data set you're going to stick with. I mean, you'll still want to kind of keep that overall structure in mind as you wireframe, and you'll see that from my movie. So if the next deliverable is a team deliverable, I'll be fine with that. So hopefully that, I don't know if that eases the load, but it is due on Sunday, and that means that this week might not be a lot of heavy discussion, although I talk a little bit about wireframing and prototyping tools, and I've got some shareable areas. You might also wish to maybe start right now to think, are you going to do desktop or mobile? I kind of am leaning toward everybody should probably do mobile. It makes life easier, and you can, in a sense, concentrate a bit more. Now, if that seems too hard because you don't know how to kind of fit your data set into a mobile form factor, that's understandable. It isn't easy to fit into a form factor, but mobile also tends to get to the point a little quicker, and that's really what I want this to be about. It's about a user journey through your data set. What do they click on? What do they see? How do they make a choice? How do they arrive to some satisfactory goal? And maybe how do they come in and do that again. Sometimes you guys are relying on repeat visits. So what's the visit like maybe the first time you come in, and what's it like the second time you come back? How do you show that something has changed? So I might have a discussion here about there is another point that you might find tricky, which is how does somebody know that you can interact with something? And I've got some tips on that, but sometimes I think the oldest one in the book is click here. So uh, we're a little more sophisticated than that now, but I think showing how something is interactive in a wireframe is really important. So there might be a little discussion here that you guys can ask for tips from each other, or maybe show some examples that you think are helpful, just in case somebody's having trouble with the design portion of this. And that's why maybe someone who's maybe more comfortable with design pairs up with someone who might be more comfortable in another area. The wireframes are certainly not a design, but they are visual, and so some of the Gestalt principles are going to come into play. Alignment and so forth are going to be important. So if you need to review that, please do. So like I said, I am going to put up a thing here now to say if you guys want to pair up, and I know there's some reading to be done. And the interaction this week might be a little light, since I know you've got work to do, but if you do want to share your progress or ask questions from others, Mural's here to do it. But I'm assuming that our interactions might be a little lighter than the previous week. Um, but that's not necessarily the case. So please let me know, and uh, use the tools at hand, or write, or however you like to finish up our exploration of our own data set. Thanks.